Hi, everyone, and thank you, Lou, for the introduction. My name is Chris Rexroth, along with Dan Romano today. Mike Fu is in our group, won't be presenting, but is around for questions in the session today. We are representing COSMIIC, which is a open source implantable device. So we're going to be talking through our process of transitioning from a closed source device at a university to open source use around the world. So we work in a field of medicine called neuromodulation. This is some background. It uses electrical stimulation in the body to either restore a function or reduce symptoms. So that could be restoring movement by stimulating a muscle or reducing pain by blocking nerve signals. The way that these therapies are introduced to humans is through medical devices. We work with high risk or class 3 medical devices. Other examples are cardiac pacemakers, ventilators, or cochlear implants. And these medical devices are key to delivering these therapies as well as developing these therapies. So our goal is to make it easier to bring these therapies like pain treatments or movement restoration or treatment for bladder and bowel incontinence um, to the general public. We are doing this because it is hard for researchers working on these therapies to get their hands on technology that is ready for humans. It can cost millions of dollars or a decade to develop your own device for your therapy. So on the other hand, researchers will try to use existing devices, but they are proprietary devices with either IP or licensing complications, and those companies could also revoke access from researchers who are using those devices.
So we
So,
want,
Dan.
we want researchers to use the COSMIC system. It is open source, it's accessible. We want this to be like the first step for researchers to prove their new therapies to help them get to in-human studies faster. And so the COSMIC system, it's a fully implantable device. It's made up of a couple different small devices that do different functions like stimulation or recording like EMG of muscles. And it's modular, it's all physically connected within the body. And it's FDA approved under an IDE for early feasibility studies. And we have our current clinical trial has implanted this system into 10 humans so far with spinal cord injury.
Is this you or me, Dan? I can't see my
Thank
speaker
you.
notes. Awesome. Um, so we see a major need for this device in the field, as well as our university, as well as the National Institutes of Health. So our research group has been working with devices such as this since the 1970s and 80s, really. We've been using this device clinically for around 10 years. However, the National Institutes of Health in the United States said, we're focusing a lot on open science and open data, but we don't necessarily have an open tool for clinical research. So our program came about, um, and in 2022, we started planning out how to make this device open source.
So the grant outlined a few milestones for us to make this device open source, but as we understood what open source was and really got a feeling for the different projects that are out there, we kind of outlined our own resources and different things to make it truly open source. So it includes its access, our resources to help other people, and then its regulatory precedents. And so full source for us means more than just software. We have all of our mechanical design and regulatory information as well as our code open source. So that is all posted on either our GitHub or our website. And so you can go to the next slide. Um, you can see just some of our different file types there. How we have our mechanical CAD. You can look through all of our different modules and how they're built. You can see our PCB layouts and schematics, and then all of our software for how to use the system. So we want people to use what's currently available, and we also want them to design new features. So it's it takes a long time and a lot of money to develop an entirely new device, but we want it to be um, as cheap as possible to use our system, or if you have a great idea, to develop your own system as well. And so we want to provide the resources to test your therapy through like a software development kit on the benchtop, and then help you transition from just a benchtop idea to doing an animal study to then doing your first in human use. And so that's what's presented here. This is our SDK, just to make it as easy as possible, just to get introduced to the system. We're currently developing an animal system to use, and then our goal is really just the whole translational chain from idea to an inhuman therapy. And so that's what this like valley of death is. A lot of researchers get to like the animal study stage, but they have a hard time getting to their first in human stage. And so we kind of want to be that bridge to helping researchers really get over this valley of death where new ideas go to die. We want to see a lot of new neuromodulation therapies come to life and exist past that regulatory stage. So.
So there are certainly legal considerations on how this was going to be done, given that there are patents and intellectual property previously held by the university. So in convincing the university to make this open source, there was some incentivization involved, and that's, a multi-million-dollar grant and multi-year grant from the National Institutes of Health. Um, so that is definitely a point in helping something go from closed to open. Now, for our university, there was not necessarily visibility to what open source is, and certainly not to any liability that could come back to the university. So it was pretty well established that the university would not want to be directly responsible for the release. This meant we had to have a colleague form a benefit corporation in order to enter into a non-exclusive license agreement with the university. This license agreement outlines all of the um, materials to be open source through patents and several grants that were used to develop the device over the years. Um, the university law team helped pick out open source licenses with our goal of being as permissive as possible. And now every year that license agreement will be updated to include new um, intellectual property that exists in the open source world. So we're able to continue expanding that relationship. So in addition to having all of this information out on the internet, we also need to establish what we're calling an ecosystem, because it's not just the open access. For us working with a hardware project, uh, our users also need to be able to access the build hardware. Sure, they could build it themselves, but for many people getting started, they prefer to have an SDK available or the ability to just buy the entire device. We also have to have a hand in the regulatory filings. There's a whole bunch of details there if you're interested in the Q&A. Our original approach was to do this all through this one organization, COSMIC Inc., the benefit corporation. However, we found out it may be easier to do this through multiple institutions um, for both strategy, but also, you know, people considerations. So this is a draft of what our full ecosystem looks like right now. You could kind of can call this a bit of a governance structure too. There's a nonprofit that will be overseeing the open access after our grant, as well as facilitating some of those interactions between users and the FDA. There is in our links in the shared notes a link to our community page, and so you can find a simplified version of this diagram along with a bit of a description on our website. So feel free to throw feedback at us. I also want to talk about some of the developments we've made through the Birdaro program thus far. I found the contributor covenant template to be very helpful. I updated our code of conduct with the text from the contributor covenant. The community rule template was great. But in general, we've been able to focus again on all of these like really important um, ideas towards creating a decentralized community after our grant ends. So figuring out what this decision making profile is going to be and how to publicly communicate the governance structure is going to be very important to us.
So I'll speak on a few of the challenges that we've seen from going through this entire process. Um, a, a a lot of the beginning challenges were people problems. So communication was a huge one between like our PI level and staff level, just on like what decisions needed to be made and who had the final say on some of these decisions. So working through that was a challenge, but we've gotten to a better place with that. Condensing institutional knowledge. So early in the presentation, Chris had mentioned that like our coworkers had been working on this project, like this type of technology for like 40 years. And so for us and new people coming in, trying to make this open source, it took a lot of effort for um, identifying who knew what and how to extract that information from them. And then in addition to that, it's been they had multiple areas where documents and knowledge were stored, just different websites, different file storage systems. And so having to sort and sift through all of that was a challenge. But we've done a good job now of kind of condensing everything and really making things more organized, which is helping us push forward the future. A couple of the challenges specifically to open source was there is a little bit of proprietary code used throughout the firmware. There was proprietary tools used in the build chain, and then there's a little bit of lack of understanding of liability. And so these are still some things that, although we are, open source, we're still figuring some of these things out to be as open as possible. And then some of the lessons learned, just defining our product versus our community name versus our organization versus the grant. So they were all kind of under like the COSMIIC name, and that can get kind of confusing. So we're trying to define and differentiate each of these different entities. And then kind of what I mentioned before was identifying your subject matter experts, and so knowing who knows what to really get at solving problems efficiently. And then one thing that we've learned as we're trying to create like a sustainability plan afterward is that open source is not a business model. So a lot of businesses will, or like as we look for funding, people will assume that because we're open source, it's not like a good business model or business plan. But we don't think open source is a business model. It's just like a strategy to kind of gain trust and gain users and attract people to our product. So that's been important. And then people enjoy the assurance of open source design, but they still require like the physical access, usability, and support. So those are all things that we're working towards being able to provide.
I just saw the duck. I'll say real quickly, we are starting to use this open hardware across the world. We've gotten some regulatory approvals, and you should check out the OSHWA Open Healthware community. We've been trying to do a lot with them, and we hope that we can be an example that other people in our field can do projects like this. So this link will just take you to a landing page that we already have in the shared notes. Thanks for your time.